So guys, I wanted to record something today because October 7th. I wrote some words down this morning because as I woke this morning, I realized that it was October 7th, and for me, October 7th was like a moment in history that changed the world. For a few reasons. One reason is that I was actually alive in a time where one of the greatest atrocities of mankind or humankind is happened uh, on that morning of the October 7th. Um, but secondly, just that here we are at 2 years along the journey. This is the second anniversary, and it's just amazing to see that from that absolute atrocity and nearing the like holocaust and kind of genocidal intentions, people lost their lives, and they weren't in war. All they were doing was actually celebrating the Feast of Sukkot, which is one of the seven feasts. As you know, I'm really into the sort of Israel stuff, and while I haven't done a lot of it lately, in the past I've run like Passover feast and Sukkot feast, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, and Feast of Trumpets, and then there's Pentecost, and there's a few others there as well. Um, but yeah, they're significant feasts, and that was what was happening on October 7th, that morning. That the terrorist attack happened. But yeah, I was thinking about it, going, wow, how much has changed in 2 years. And I think about like Israel is a nation that I've connected to, but it's also a nation that is a lot of history in Judeo-Christian. If you read the first part of the Bible, it's all about this nation, Israel, and the birth of this nation. And people remember that it's about the story of Moses, and Moses, going to Egypt, Egyptian Pharaoh, and saying, "Let my people go." And that was set into motion this nation called Israel, and the nation being as in the people, not the state, all this sort of stuff, or the government side of things, or anything like that. As history goes on, but yeah, the nation as the people, and that nation was born out of slavery, and it was set free, and then it went into the desert, and there was lots of to and fro, and this nation of about 1 million people, was wandering around the desert, complaining all the time. They'd just been set free. They had seen massive power, massive miracles from God, and yet they still were complaining and grumbling for various reasons. Sometimes they had to eat the same thing every day, and that's always a challenge when you want variety. Just the fact that sometimes things didn't work out quite as they were hoping. Didn't realize they were going to go into a desert type scenario. And sort of trusting this leader. But anyway, the long story short is that that nation was formed by Moses' moment on Mount Sinai with the Ten Commandments, and that's essentially to say, this is how you live in community. This is how you love the God, which is God of Israel in that scenario, and this is how you love your neighbor as yourself. And so, and that's all about kind of the last parts of the Ten Commandments, which is all about how to be in community. Don't be jealous, don't steal, don't lie, all that sort of stuff. Don't kill, that kind of stuff. So there's this situation where you got this nation that God has given instructions and guidelines and help to go, this is the best way to run society. Now, the bigger picture of this nation is it was called the sheep nation. It was like the original nation, God going, this is the blueprint to be a light to the nations. Because if you live the way that God intended, you become this example and this leader, I guess, in how to live. Because if we did follow those things, we'd be on the right track. Fortunately, the history of Israel proves that was not the case, and there's so much there. But that's the origins, and this is this is a lot of years ago. So if you think of 2,000 years ago was Christ, it was well beyond that. I think even another 2,000 years. So let's say 4,000 years. So now I might not be completely right there, but it's been around for a long time as a nation. And so, while it's done a lot of wrong things along the way, it is a nation. And it was a nation that God set apart. It was the sheep nation. It was Judeo-Christian. It went from Judeo to Christian. That's kind of what happened in that process. Obviously introducing Christ down the line. But all this is to say that this was a set-apart people by God to be a light to the nations. And now it's probably the most fought over bit of dirt in the world, considering everything that's gone down in the last 2 years since the October 7th situation in southern Israel. It's probably the most talked about and most fought about bit of dirt on the earth. So it must mean something. It's the center, because we know that there is a lot of other conflicts going on, whether that be Ukraine, Russia, or the forgotten one, which is the fact that there's a genocide going on in Nigeria, and that's from Christians getting killed. And so, but that doesn't get any airplay. None of that gets airplay. But this thing that's going on between Israel and Palestine has got all of the attention. So is this something about this patch of dirt? And the history would suggest so, because all the way back, if we follow the history of Israel, there's been a lot of conflict. These two groups, one wanting to take one out, the other trying to defend for its life, and then all sorts of accusations and things going on. Now, I don't want to get into that. I'm not experienced enough to be able to speak about the intricacies of one particular government's decisions to another. But what I do want to highlight is that here we are on October the 7th, 2 years on from that atrocity in Israel. And there's 48 hostages still in captivity by that terrorist organization in Palestine. And it's interesting that we have completely forgotten about those 48. Like from what I can see in the Western media, our direction has gone completely towards the plight of Palestine and the fact that there is a war going on, and the collateral of that war is, unfortunately, a lot of lives. But there are sinister agendas behind that as well. As I said, the numbers, could be made up. They might not be as well. The reality of kids dying is a terrible thing, absolutely, and families and no one likes to be in war. And I think because we live in an era of social media, we're seeing all this like it daily broadcasted to our phones and our smart devices. And but back in World War II, you didn't see that, but it would have been an atrocity. So many people lost their lives in that space, in a war that went on. And so this was a war that was begun, this particular war of many, was done and it begun on October 7th. And it was instigated by an attack on a bunch of communities that were just celebrating one of the feasts of Jerusalem, of the Jews, which is Sukkot. And an important one. It's about gathering families and feasting together and gathering and remembering God's provision in their life and being thankful and things like that. So it's a very holy time, this time of September, October, for Jews. So yeah, it just for me, I just had to at least take the opportunity to just talk to even this phone and record this on October 7 because um, I'm amazed that the Jewish people around the world are probably the most persecuted people in the world, in the sense of it's horrendous what is happening to Jews all around the world, even in Western countries, and fearful to even gather in temples and go to their worship practices because they just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we're just a couple of days away from an atrocity again in the UK of just some Jews going to temple and then losing their life to an attack. So this is the nation that God set apart to be a light to the nations, and yet it's the most hated group of people in the world, which confuses me, especially since as a Judeo-Christian or as a Christian, there's a connection to this being God's people and God's nation. And so it's interesting that if there's such an attack on Jews around the world, there must be something greater going on and bigger than all of us. And I think it's spiritual myself. And so, yeah. But it's interesting, I think, that we are in a situation now where there's more attention on freeing this nation or this state of Palestine from occupation, where it's actually under the leadership of Hamas at the moment, and they continue to want to destroy Israel. And they want to destroy the Jews, and they want to take over that land, and that's what the river to the sea chant's all about. But so many of the people in the West have sort of gone and said, okay, Israel are the bad guys in this situation, and I just think it's really sad that we've got to a point where we've forgotten about the 48 hostages that are still in captivity, and they're trying to broker a peace agreement at the moment, and there's 21 points, and there's some amazing stuff that's happened, and I've learned that a little bit about that today, about the Arab nations and the Muslim nations around Israel actually being on board with this thing, and so it's quite amazing to think that there are some movements. We don't know where it's going to go. I heard on church on Sunday, well, it's not a politician that's going to save the world, it's actually God, and so that's our prayer. And there's a prayer in Psalm 122, which is verse 6, and it says, pray for the people, peace in Jerusalem, and may all who love this city prosper. And it's talking about praying for Israel, praying for this nation, because ultimately it's trying to get back to the blueprint. It is the sheep nation. It's the nation that is God's people. God chose them and called them out of Egypt and started a nation and a people. And so as Christians, we need to be aware of that. But I think also as people in general, is like we need to start to question why is this patch of dirt in the Middle East so fought over, and how do we get so convinced by the agendas to say no, we need to hate Israel, which is the complete opposite of I think what we're supposed to be doing. So yeah, I don't know much more I was going to share, but I just want to take time. I think I'll forever remember October 7, because it will just be a moment where true evil entered in to a community and or communities, and it wasn't without the brave souls that gave up their life to defend their families. There would have been much more. And so that's my thoughts on October 7. And as I look down in my auto write this morning, I see a picture of the number 48, and I drew 48 tears, because that's 48 people that are still in captivity 2 years after that atrocity, and used as a bargaining chip in a horrible war. My prayer is that we continue to pray for the people involved, pray for wisdom, pray for breakthrough, pray for God's will to be done in that situation, whatever that be done, whatever that is. Well, time will tell. So anyway, that's my thoughts. 15 minutes of me rambling on about October 7, but it's something I wanted to do today. And thanks for listening. Even if